بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم الحمد لله رب العالمين والصلاة والسلام على سيدنا ومولانا محمد وعلى آل سيدنا ومولانا محمد وبارك وسلم. اللهم ارزقنا العلم والعمل والإخلاص يا رب العالمين. اللهم ربنا أرنا الحق حقا وارزقنا اتباعه وأرنا الباطل باطلا وارزقنا اجتنابها. اللهم أرنا حقائق الأشياء كما هي. ربنا زدنا علما وعملا وإخلاصا يا رب العالمين. اللهم انصر أولياءك في غزة وفي اليمن وفي مشارق الأرض ومغاربها. اللهم انصرهم على عدوك وعدوهم إنك على كل شيء قدير. اللهم فرج عنا ولعبادك في غزة وفي اليمن وفي لبنان وفي مشارق الأرض ومغاربها. اللهم نفس كربنا وكربنا وثبت أقدامنا وأقدام الطوبنا وبهم يا أرحم الراحمين يا رب العالمين. اللهم انصر من نصر أهل غزة. اللهم اقتل من قتل أهل غزة يا رب العالمين. وصل وسلم على سيدنا وحبيبنا وشفينا وطبيب قلوبنا محمد وآله وأزواجه وأعوانه وأنصاره وأصحابه وإخوانه إلى يوم الدين، ولعنة الله على أعدائهم أجمعين برحمتك يا أرحم الراحمين. So we are going to look at these three concepts. The concept of orthodoxy, the concept of revisionism, and so who is a revisionist, who is an orthodox, and who is a modernist, and what's the difference between them. So obviously terminologies or the concepts are a categorization, and categorization to a certain extent is also a falsification of reality, because in reality concepts don't exist in reality. What exists in reality is concrete things, or the relationship between them. So concepts are tools to understand reality. There's always going to be overlap between the reference of different concepts. So basically we try to understand the main differences, for example, through the concept, if that's what our purpose is, rather than trying to pinpoint everything through them. It's not possible. Anyway, let me start here. So the concept of it is important to distinguish between two major currents in contemporary Islamic thinking on economic issues. Okay, so these concepts are being introduced specifically in relation to economic issues, but that doesn't mean they can't be generalized. But let's understand them in this context first. So saying orthodox ulama, so ulama mean Islamic scholars. So among Islamic scholars there are orthodox and there are unorthodox. But orthodoxy and unorthodoxy or non-orthodoxy has a continuum. Okay, so a person might be unorthodox in one aspect, but might not be unorthodox in some other aspects. Okay, so really the point is not to judge people, to try to understand the reality, understand the concepts, understand how people deal with those concepts, or how people deal with the reality, and what are the major differences in their dealing with the reality. Okay. So it is important to distinguish between two major currents in contemporary Islamic thinking on economic issues. Orthodox ulama such as Sayyid Qutb and Maulana Maududi, and obviously they are presented here as representative in this aspect because in the first place they are the one who actually have dealt with economic issues in relation to Islam. A lot of ulama haven't, for example, in as far as economic issues and modern economic issues or modern system is concerned. So, but these are names as illustration. They are not exhaustive. So, orthodox ulama such as Sayyid Qutb and Maulana Maududi seek to revive the tradition of Islam of Imam Ghazali and Imam Ibn Taymiyyah, orthodox ulama. One is a Shafi Mujtahid, the other is a Hanbali Mujtahid, or top Mujtahid in different ulum, different disciplines. And obviously, Imam Ghazali is prior to Imam Ibn Taymiyyah. And Imam Ibn Taymiyyah, in a sense, is the disciple of Imam Ibn Taymiyyah, in a sense, is a disciple of Imam Ghazali in many ways, in many aspects, especially in its critique of non-Islamic philosophies and logics, etc. Orthodox ulama such as Sayyid Qutb and Imam Maududi, rahimahumullah ta'ala alayhim ajma'in, and Imam Ghazali and Imam Ibn Taymiyyah, radwanullah alayhim ajma'in, tradition of Imam Ghazali present Islam as a complete closed system, fundamentally different from the way of life and the systems of thought which have achieved world dominance since the triumph of the Enlightenment. So that's the very, very heavy few lines, and we need to understand them properly in order to understand what orthodoxy is specifically in relation to or in the context of dealings with and understanding of Islamic thinking on economic issues. Okay, so let's see. Let's unpack this slowly. So, why does the question of Islam as a complete system arise in the first place? Because that seems to be Islam. Why does this question arise in the first place? Because we think about it, it seems a pretty self-evident thing that Islam is a complete way of life. If no Islam, it's different sources and it's different disciplines, you will know that Islam covers every aspect of life, either directly or through derivation. Directly that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala and the Prophet has uh, uh, described certain teachings about that aspect of life, or commanded certain things, prohibited certain things, etc. Or if there's a new situation about which there is no direct command, it's always possible based on general principle to drive commands about those new aspects of life or new aspects or issues of life or new um, problems or new situations through, for example, analogy, um, based on the general principles which are implicit in those commands which are given, those situations which are about which the teachings are already given directly by Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. So either there are direct commands, direct teachings about certain things, or if there are no direct teachings about certain situations, then we can derive Islamic teachings about those things based on the direct teachings which we have. Okay, so that's called ijtihad or istikhraj and all those things, or istinbat, etc. And that's the main function of, or main duty of ulama, and that's why they are the heirs of prophets or warisin of Anbiya alayhim salam. That's why faqih is a waris of Anbiya, waris of the Prophet sallallahu alayhi wa alihi wasallam. That's why faqih is the wali of ummah, because he is there to um, do the do the work which of a prophet, in a sense, in the sense that in the absence of the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam, based on his teaching, he does what Prophet would have done if he was there. In that specific sense, they are the heirs of the prophets and the messengers alayhim salam ajma'in. Okay, so what I was saying is it's actually a very self-evident thing. So why we need to reiterate that Islam is a complete way of life or system, etc. Why this is something new? And the reason is that the situation has changed. Situation has changed. Because Islam as a civilization which has actual power and domination or hegemony, not over individual and societies, but also on the states, the sources of power, has been largely defeated by colonialism. And Islam actually no longer has, for example, state power. So state is run by, even in Muslim countries, based in the colonial era, and after that the people which were trained by the colonial masters, and which even today represent those colonial masters, they run the state and use the power to shape society and individual lives based on teachings which are either indifferent to Islamic teachings, or partially opposed to it, or actually completely opposed to it. But in any case, Islam doesn't run the show anymore. So Islamic teachings became, so people stopped reading about those part of fiqh which was no longer applicable, for example, to that aspect of life. So from there, it is easy to get into the false impression that Islam doesn't have teaching about those aspects of life, because those disciplines are no longer active disciplines, because when disciplines are active, they are always developing, and they are always adding new concepts and new claims and counterclaims about new arising situations based on the history and tradition of those disciplines. Okay, but more than that, actually, because new colonialism and the ideologies they brought in, for example, capitalism, claim that they are complete way of life. So, and so they are in exact contradiction with Islam, for example. So they have power and they have claims that they are the one who actually run the show, not Islam. Not it. So, for example, they claimed and they have power to implement that and education to spread those things that religion is, for example, just a private matter for individual life and even individual life to certain private parts of that individual life. So Islam is being pushed even intellectually to the side. Practically, it has been even intellectually. So even Muslims started to forget that Islam is a complete way of life. And those who were either impressed by or deluded by or overwhelmed by the existing system or were actually the agents of that, they tried to bring in, based on Islamic teachings, etc., try to propagate false views that Islam is actually doesn't have instructions, at least not complete and um, detailed instruction about certain parts of life, for example, about politics, about economics. Through that, they try to propagate in different ways and in different level the view that Islam view, even if they don't say that Islam is not a complete way of life, which is hard to say. In practice, what they are propagating is contradict the fact that Islam is a complete way of life. Okay, so in this context, it became important, and that's what we mean by when we say Maulana Maudud is ijtihad, that Islam is a complete way of life. Ijtihad in the sense that in this new situation, he reasserted the claim according to the current context that Islam is a complete way of life and that Islam is not just providing general principles which can be manipulated by politicians and economists or who not, but it's a complete system in the sense that it provides complete, detailed account of and guidance about every aspect of human life. And defending this claim in based on Islamic sources as well as in a way, and not just in a way which apply to the situation at hand. And the situation is that there is capitalism as a powerful alien civilization has hegemony over the world as well as most of the Islamic lands, either directly or indirectly. So in this context, reasserting the claim and making a detailed statement about that Islam is actually a complete way of life. That's why it becomes uh, an ijtihad and it becomes an issue in this very context that Islam. So those are orthodox ulama which claim that Islam is a complete system that it has teachings regarding every aspects of life, every new situation, economics, politics, individual, social, marital, personal, impersonal, etc., war, a relationship between nations, science, technology, everything, education, bureaucracy, police, army, have not just general principle, but So that general principle can be used by revisionists and modernists to actually make Islam compatible with modernity without actually denying, actual workings of modernities. So that's why it's important detailed guidance about every aspect of life, and provide arguments for that from Islamic sources as well as general principles in a way which applies to the situation at hand. And the situation at hand is that an alien civilization is hegemonic, and it contests the, and it has technological power, it has money, it has state power, it and it contests through its educational system, through its media, that is Islam, and other religions have no dominion over human life in its entirety, but belongs to very narrow aspects of life, and that narrow aspect is always receding as well. So, in the context of that situation, to reassert that Islam is a complete system, that's a major ijtihad. Even though the fact that Islam is a complete way of life is actually a self-evident truth in very basic sense, and you don't need any ijtihad for that. Um, there are sarih, explicit Islamic teaching, direct teachings about this very matter from the Islamic sources, etc. Okay. And the second thing is, it's not just a complete system, but a closed system. Closed system in the sense that, because, and this is also contextual, because when we calling Islam as a closed system, we calling it in the context of the hegemony of the West, which can actually have the ability to actually swallow Islam and reshape it. So that calling it Islam as a closed system is important in that respect. But closed system can have many meaning, but one of the meaning is that Islam is self-sufficient, and that is sort of it is already implicit in the meaning of complete, but self-sufficient system. It is implicit in the meaning of the complete, but needs to be made explicit, given that you can play around with Islam as a complete system and still not really believe that Islam is a complete system, because you can say, oh, Islam gives some general principles. So in that sense, it's complete, but doesn't give a detailed guidance, as if fiqh doesn't exist. um, uh, Guidance, because and that can be made compatible with the hegemony of the Western capitalist barbarism or civilization, as they call it. So closed can mean it's a self-sufficient system. Closed can also mean that it is a system. As a system, it is incompatible with, for example, other systems, including Western capitalism, socialism, nationalism, liberalism. It's incompatible with them. You can't combine Islam and liberalism. You can't combine Islam and capitalism. You can't combine Islam and polytheism, Islam and Christianity, Islam and Judaism. You can't combine Islam and socialism, and Islam and nationalism, fascism, etc. There can't be any Islamic liberalism, Islamic capitalism, Islamic socialism, Islamic nationalism. قل يا أيها الكافرون لا قل يا أيها الكافرون لا أعبد ما تعبدون ولا أنتم عابدون ما أعبد ولا أنا عابد ما عبدتم ولا أنتم عابدون ما أعبد لكم دينكم ولي دين. One of the implication of this ayah, which is actually a tahaddi, not a, as some try to misinterpret it as some sort of a live all claim. So Islam is incompatible with, so it's a closed system in the sense that it's a self-sufficient system, and it's a closed system in the sense that it's incompatible with other systems. And it can't be added to other system, or etc. Okay, it's incompatible with enlightenment, liberalism, and all those things. Okay, let's go back and probably we'll stop here. So it is. So basically, we try to orthodox. That's what orthodoxy mean in this context. In the context of Western civilization, that Islam is a complete and closed system, fundamentally different from the way of life and the system of thought which have achieved world dominance or hegemony since the triumph of enlightenment. That is, the capitalist world system, or whatever, or capitalist way of life, which has different ideologies, but which is itself a way of life. So that's a basic understanding, but we'll see next time whether we can add to it. Otherwise, we will move on to the second concept, which is revisionism, to which I sort of implicitly alluded in how I try to define orthodoxy in this session. Okay, subhanakallahumma wa bihamdika nashhadu an la ilaha illa anta nastaghfiruka ونتوب إليك اللهم صل على محمد وعلى آل محمد وعلى آل سيدنا ومولانا محمد وبارك وسلم اللهم إنا نسألك قلوبا أواهة مخبتة منيبة في سبيلك اللهم اجعل حبك أحب الأشياء إلينا واجعل خشيتك أخوف الأشياء عندنا واقطع عنا حاجات الدنيا بالشوق إلى لقائك يا حبيبنا يا حبيب قلوبنا يا مولانا وإذا أقررت أعين أهل الدنيا من دنياهم فأقرر عيوننا من عبادك يا رب العالمين وإذا أقررت أعين أهل الدنيا من دنياهم فأقرر أعيننا من عبادتك يا رب العالمين اللهم إنا نسألك التوفيق لمحبك من الأعمال وصدق التوكل عليك وحسن الظن بك يا رب العالمين اللهم افتح مسامع قلوبنا لذكرك وارزقنا طاعتك وطاعة رسولك وعملا بكتابك يا رب العالمين اللهم صل على محمد وعلى آل محمد كما صليت على إبراهيم وعلى آل إبراهيم إنك حميد مجيد سبحانك اللهم وبحمدك نشهد أن لا إله إلا أنت نستغفرك ونتوب إليك آمين صلى الله تعالى على خير خلق محمد وآله وصحبه وزوجه وذريته برحمتك